March 14, 1973, NBC Studios, Burbank, California, 8:15 p.m. Dean Martin sat in the makeup chair, powder on his face, hairspray in place, the routine he'd done thousands of times. The Tonight Show was going on air in 20 minutes. Standard appearance. Promote the latest album. Tell some jokes. Do the Dean Martin thing. The drunk act. The smooth charm. The easy smile that made everything look effortless. He was 55 years old, and he was exhausted, not physically, emotionally. Exhausted from being Dean Martin, from playing the character, from hiding who he really was. Johnny Carson walked into the makeup room. "Dean, you ready? We start in 15.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Dean's voice sounded flat. Tired. Johnny heard it, sat down. That wasn't normal. Dean didn't show vulnerability. Didn't let people see past the mask. "You okay? You don't sound like yourself." Dean looked at Johnny through the mirror. "Do you ever feel like you've played a role so long that you forgot who you really are?" Johnny was quiet for a moment. "Every day. That's part of this job. Doesn't it bother you?" Dean asked. "Doesn't it make you want to do something real? Something honest? Something that actually means something instead of just entertaining people?" Johnny leaned forward. "If you want to do something real tonight, do it. I'll give you the space. I'll back you up. Use the show however you need." Dean smiled slightly. "You'd really let me do that? Come out there as yourself? Not as Dean Martin? Let's see what happens." 20 minutes later, Dean Martin walked onto the Tonight Show stage, waved to the audience, sat down on the couch, smiled. Did everything he was supposed to do. But something was different. Something had changed in that makeup room. Something about Johnny's challenge, something about being given permission to be real. The interview started normally. Standard questions. Standard jokes. Exactly what everyone expected. Then Dean said something nobody expected. "Johnny, can I tell you something? Something I've never said on television before. Something I've hidden for 40 years. The room went quiet. This wasn't a comedy bit. This wasn't performance. This was confession. I'm tired of being Dean Martin. Tired of the drunk act. Tired of the character. And I need to tell 77 million people the truth." Johnny leaned forward. "What truth?" Dean took a breath and said the words that would change everything. "The drunk act is fake. All of it. The stumbling. The slurring. The glass of whiskey. It's apple juice. It's performance. It's a character I created 40 years ago, and I'm done pretending it's real." The audience was completely silent. 77 million people watching at home. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Dean Martin had just admitted that the core of his persona, the thing he was most famous for, was fake, was a lie, was performance instead of person. And Johnny Carson, sitting at his desk, started crying. Not trying to hide it. Not trying to maintain composure, just crying. Because what he'd just witnessed was the bravest thing he'd ever seen on television. For years afterward, people wondered what made Dean finally tell the truth. Was it planned? Was it spontaneous? Was it real? Nobody knew. Not the producers, not the audience, not even the people closest to Dean. The full story stayed hidden until long after Dean Martin died. The Tonight Show in March 1973 was more than a television program. It was a cultural institution, an American ritual. 77 million people tuned in every night. 1 out of every 3 Americans. More reach than any other platform in existence. More influence than newspapers. More trust than the evening news. Johnny Carson wasn't just a talk show host. He was America's companion. The voice people heard before bed. The face they trusted, the personality they invited into their homes every single night. When Johnny endorsed something, people believed it. When Johnny questioned something, people reconsidered. When Johnny laughed, America laughed with him. March 1973 was a specific cultural moment. Vietnam War winding down. Troops coming home. Watergate scandal just beginning. Nixon still president but trust eroding. America was tired. Tired of being lied to, tired of government deception, tired of personas and performances. Hungry for something real, something authentic, something true. The Tonight Show became a place where that hunger could be satisfied, where celebrities could be human, where conversations felt genuine even when they were staged, where Johnny's ability to connect made people feel less alone. This was the context Dean Martin walked into on March 14, 1973. Not just a television appearance, a moment, a cultural opportunity, a chance to be real in front of the most trusted platform in America. Dean Martin in March 1973 was at a crossroads, professionally successful, personally struggling. His television variety show had just been canceled after 9 seasons. Good run, respectable end, but still an ending. His marriage to Jane was dissolving. 20 years together, 3 children. Falling apart, his son Dan Paul was flying jets. Dangerous. Worrying. Dean thought about mortality constantly. His movie career was slowing. The roles were different now. Older characters, supporting parts. Not leading man anymore. He was 55, still performing, still successful, still Dean Martin, but feeling like Dino Crossetti was disappearing, buried under decades of performance. The question haunted him. Who am I when nobody's watching? Who am I when the cameras stop? Who am I when Dean Martin isn't needed anymore? March 14, 1973 wasn't chosen for any particular reason. Just another Tonight Show booking. Just another promotional appearance. But Dean's state of mind made it different, made it significant, made it the moment when decades of hiding became unbearable, made it the night when truth mattered more than safety. The theories started immediately after the broadcast. Before the show even ended, NBC's switchboard lit up. 50,000 calls in the first hour. People demanding answers, demanding to know if what they'd just seen was real. Theory 1 was immediate. It was scripted. NBC publicity stunt for ratings. Dean and Johnny planned the whole thing to create buzz, to generate headlines, to make people talk. The timing was too perfect, critics said. Right as Dean's show was canceled. Right as he needed relevance. Right as NBC needed a viral moment. An NBC executive told Variety the next day that they had no advance knowledge. But a competing network's programming director wasn't buying it. This is too clean, too emotional, too perfectly timed. Carson and Martin are professionals. They know how to create moments. This was manufactured authenticity designed to look spontaneous. Oh. The executive pointed to the camera work. The way Johnny positioned himself, the perfect arc of the confession. Real breakdowns don't have 3-act structure, he said. Entertainment Weekly ran a piece suggesting the whole thing was workshopped, that Dean and Johnny had rehearsed the beats, that the tears were real but the surprise wasn't. Theory 2 was darker. Dean was actually drunk during the confession. The irony was perfect. Too perfect, admitting the drunk act was fake while being genuinely intoxicated. A reporter from TV Guide who'd been backstage said Dean seemed different in the hours before the show. Not his usual self. More withdrawn, more emotional. Several people backstage said Dean seemed off, different. His eyes were glassy. His movements were slower. Maybe he was drinking for real and the confession was alcohol talking. Maybe the truth came out because his defenses were down. Maybe admitting the act was fake was his way of justifying why he was actually drunk. A Tonight Show makeup artist was quoted anonymously. "I've done Dean's makeup dozens of times. That night he smelled different. Not cologne. Something else. Maybe he needed liquid courage to tell the truth." Theory 3 involved medical necessity. Dan had received a diagnosis. Liver problems. Health scare. Doctor's orders to quit drinking. The confession was cover. Saving face while following medical advice. An entertainment columnist for the Los Angeles Times wrote, "Maybe Dean had to quit, and this was his way of explaining it to the public without admitting weakness. Admitting the act was fake is better than admitting your body can't handle it anymore." This way he controls the narrative. He's choosing to stop, not being forced to stop. The theory gained traction when a Hollywood physician was quoted saying liver damage was common among performers Dean's age who'd been drinking for decades. Even if he wasn't drinking as much as the character suggested, Years of any alcohol consumption takes a toll. Dean is 55. That's when bodies start demanding different choices. Theory 4 was professional desperation. Dean's career was slipping. Needed publicity boost. Needed to stay relevant. The confession was calculated, strategic, designed to generate headlines and remind people he existed. A veteran agent not affiliated with Dean told Rolling Stone, Dean Martin admitting the drunk act is fake. That's front page news. Every newspaper, every magazine, every radio show. Smart career move if you're trying to stay in the conversation. His TV show just got canceled. His movie roles are drying up. This puts him back on the map. Controversial, newsworthy, brilliant. The agent pointed to similar confessions by other fading stars. One, your relevance is slipping, you create a moment. Den created the moment of the decade. Theory 5 suggested mental breakdown. Dean lost control on air. Couldn't maintain the persona anymore. Had a moment of crisis and confessed without meaning to. A psychiatrist quoted in a magazine article said, "This has all the hallmarks of a public breakdown." The exhaustion Dean mentioned, the emotional vulnerability, the tears, the loss of professional boundaries. This wasn't planned. This was collapse. This was a man who reached his breaking point and couldn't hold the mask in place anymore. The psychiatrist noted that high-pressure performers often experience what he called persona fatigue, the psychological cost of maintaining a public character for decades. Eventually, the real person demands to be seen. Sometimes that demand comes out in controlled, healthy ways. Sometimes it explodes. Theory 6 involved Johnny's pressure. Carson had been pushing Dean to be more authentic for months, maybe even threatening to expose the truth unless Dean did it himself, giving him the choice to control the narrative or have it revealed without his consent. A Tonight Show writer who'd left the show the year before told a reporter, Johnny had power, real power. If he wanted to expose someone, he could. Maybe he gave Dean an ultimatum. Come clean on your terms or I'll do it for you. That would explain the makeup room conversation. That would explain why Johnny seemed so prepared for what happened. The writer suggested Johnny might have discovered the truth and given Den the option to confess rather than be exposed. That's actually compassionate, giving someone the chance to tell their own truth before someone else tells it for them. Theory 7 was simpler, planned retirement announcement. Den was quitting show business. The confession was his way of closing the door on Dean Martin before stepping away entirely. Retiring the character before retiring himself. A Las Vegas entertainment director told a local newspaper, "This feels like goodbye. Like Dean is telling us he's done. Done with the character. Done with performing. Done with all of it. You don't burn down your brand unless you're walking away from it." This is Dean Martin's retirement speech. He's just not calling it that yet. The director predicted Dean would announce formal retirement within 6 months. Theory 8 involved competition with Frank Sinatra. Frank had recently done Honest, emotional television special where he discussed his failures and regrets. Maybe Dean was trying to one-up him, show he could be even more vulnerable, even more real, even more honest. A Rat Pack historian published a piece arguing Dean and Frank always competed. Not openly, not hostilely, but competed. If Frank bears his soul on TV, Dean has to go deeper, has to be more honest, has to reveal something even Frank hasn't revealed. That's how their friendship worked. Push each other, challenge each other, see who can be braver. All wrong. Every single theory. Wrong. Every speculation missing the fundamental truth. Nobody knew the real story, not for decades. Now, you might think this was just a celebrity confession. Someone admitting their persona was fake. A moment of television drama that people talked about for a few weeks before moving on to the next thing. But here's what makes this different. The Tonight Show in 1973 was the most watched program in America. 77 million people tuned in every night. That's 1 out of every 3 Americans. More viewers than the Super Bowl. more reach than any political speech, more cultural impact than any single event. When you appeared on The Tonight Show, you reached more people than any other platform in existence. And Dean Martin used that platform to commit what everyone thought was career suicide. Because admitting the drunk act was fake meant admitting he'd lied to fans for 27 years. Admitting the core of his brand was performance, not reality. Admitting that everything people loved about Dean Martin, the effortless cool, the tipsy charm, the casual sophistication, was manufactured, calculated, performed. That should have destroyed him, ended his career, made people feel betrayed, made them turn away, made them reject him for being fake. But something else happened instead. Something nobody predicted. Something that changed how America thought about celebrity, about authenticity, about the cost of success, about what it means to be real in a world that rewards performance. But nobody knew the full story. Not for decades. Not until long after Dean was gone. The witnesses to that broadcast carried the memory differently. An NBC camera operator named Stephen Walsh was working camera 2 that night, focused on Dean's face for most of the confession. He'd filmed Dean dozens of times over the years, knew his expressions, knew his tells, knew when Dean was performing and when something real was breaking through. In 1988, he gave a detailed review to a television archive project. "I've filmed thousands of hours of television. Comedians, actors, politicians, presidents, never seen anything like that night. I zoomed in on Dean's eyes when he started talking about being tired. That's standard. You go tight on emotion. But what I saw through the lens shocked me. His eyes were different. Not the Don Martin eyes. Something more vulnerable, more human. The studio went dead silent. Then people started crying. Not just Johnny. People in the audience. People in the control room. The audio guy next to me was wiping his eyes. You could feel something shift in that room. This wasn't TV anymore. This was confession. This was church. This was witnessing something sacred. A Tonight Show producer named Margaret Chen was in the control booth that night. She'd been with the show for 8 years. Seen everything. Managed everything, handled every crisis. In 1985, she gave an interview about that night. "I remember the exact moment I realized this wasn't planned. Dean said I need to tell 77 million people the truth, and I looked at my notes. Nothing there. No segment plan, no approved topic. Just standard interview. New album. I picked up the phone to call down to the floor, to tell them to cut to commercial. Standard procedure when something goes off script. But before I could dial, Johnny looked up at camera 1, made eye contact with the lens, shook his head slightly, so subtle most people wouldn't catch it. But I knew what it meant. Don't cut. Let this happen. He knew this was important. He knew we had to let it breathe. So we stayed live, broadcast the whole thing. Every word, every pause, every tear. An audience member named Patricia Rodriguez sat in the 3rd row that night. She was 34 years old, worked as a teacher, had watched The Tonight Show every night since college. Getting tickets had taken months. She'd been so excited. In 1990, she told a television historian, "I was sitting next to a couple from Iowa. They'd saved for 2 years to come to LA and see the show. We were all excited. Then Dean started talking about being tired of the character, and the woman next to me grabbed my hand. Just grabbed it. We didn't know each other, but she grabbed my hand and held on. You could feel something in that room. Something important. Something you don't feel watching TV at home." When Dean said the drunk act was fake, the man from Iowa started crying. Big guy. Farmer type, just crying. Then his wife. Then me. Then everyone around us. I've never experienced anything like it. It felt like watching someone be honest in a way I'd never seen. Like he'd given all of us permission to admit we were tired of our own acts. Entertainment journalist Tom Shales covered the story the next day for the Washington Post. Wrote about it for years afterward. In 1992, he reflected, "Everyone remembers that night. Everyone has a theory. Everyone thinks they know what really happened. But nobody knows if it was real or planned. Dean never explained. Johnny never revealed what they discussed beforehand. The producers maintained they were blindsided, but the truth is we'll never really know. And maybe that's fitting. Maybe some moments are supposed to stay mysterious. What we do know is that it mattered. It changed something. It made people think differently about celebrity, about performance, about the cost of success. That's real impact regardless of whether the moment was spontaneous or scripted. For years after the broadcast, people asked Dean about it. In every interview, every appearance, every conversation. Well, was it planned? What made you do it? Dean's answers were always vague, deflecting. It felt like the right time. Johnny gave me the space to be honest. Sometimes you just need to tell the truth. Never explaining, never elaborating, never giving the full story. Johnny was asked about it too, multiple times. Multiple interviews over the years. His answer was consistent. That was Dean's moment. His truth, not my story to tell. The makeup room conversation stayed private. What Johnny said, what Dean said, what changed between them. Nobody knew. If you had built a career on a character, spent 27 years playing a role, made millions pretending to be someone you're not, would you have the courage to admit it? On live television, to 77 million people, knowing it might cost you everything, knowing people might feel betrayed, knowing your brand might collapse, knowing success might evaporate. Or would you have done what Dean Martin did? Chosen truth over safety, honesty over success, authenticity over the character, reality over performance. Dean sat on the Tonight Show couch. 77 million people watching. Johnny had just asked it. What truth do you need to tell? Dean looked directly at the camera, not at Johnny, not at the audience, at America, at everyone watching. The drunk act is fake, he said. Clear, direct, final, no hesitation. Every stumble, every slurred word, every time you've seen me on stage with a glass of what looks like whiskey. That's not whiskey. It's apple juice. Sometimes it's water with food coloring. Sometimes it's nothing. Just an empty glass I pretend to drink from. The drunk character. Don Martin, the lovable drunk who sings and stumbles and makes everything look easy. That's never been me. I created that character in 1946, 27 years ago, because people were more comfortable with a harmless drunk than they were with an Italian immigrant from Ohio. Because being non-threatening sold. Because the smooth, slightly tipsy crooner was marketable in ways that Dino Crossetti never would be. So I became Dean Martin, and Dean Martin became the drunk, and for 27 years, I've let people believe it's real. I've let people think I'm actually drinking, actually stumbling, actually living that life. And I'm done. I'm 55 years old, I'm tired, and I need to tell the truth. The studio was completely silent. You could hear the cameras, the slight hum of the lights, the breathing of the audience. Nothing else. Johnny's face was wet with tears. He wasn't trying to hide them, wasn't trying to maintain professional distance, wasn't trying to keep composure, just crying. Openly, honestly, Dean continued, I want people to know something. The character served a purpose. It made me successful. It made me millions of dollars. It gave me a career. It gave me everything I have. But it also buried who I really am. Buried Dino Crossetti, the kid from Steubenville who worked in steel mills, who learned to sing in his father's barbershop, who changed his name because too Italian wouldn't work in Hollywood, who fought 50 street fights before he was 20, who knew what it meant to be hated for things you couldn't control. That person, the real person, got erased by Dan Martin. And I let it happen, because success mattered more than authenticity, because money mattered more than truth, because the character was easier than the person, because pretending was safer than being real. But tonight, I'm choosing different. Tonight, I'm choosing honesty. Tonight, I'm telling 77 million people the drunk act is fake. Dean Martin is fake. The only real thing is Dino. And Dino is tired of hiding. Dean stopped, looked at it. Johnny couldn't speak, couldn't form words. His throat was tight, his eyes were streaming. Just sat there crying. Finally, he managed. "Why now? What changed?" Dean smiled, a real, not the Dean Martin smile, not the performance, something sadder, more honest, more vulnerable. "Because you asked me in the makeup room if I ever felt like I'd forgotten who I was. And I realized I have. I've been Dean Martin so long that Dino disappeared, and I'm running out of time to get him back. I'm 55. My father died at 68. If I'm lucky, I have maybe 10, 15 years left. And I don't want to die as Dean Martin. I want to die as Dino. As myself. As the person I was before I built this character. So tonight on your show, in front of 77 million people, I'm starting over. I'm dropping the act. I'm being real. And whatever happens next, happens." The audience didn't know how to respond. This wasn't entertainment. This wasn't comedy. This wasn't what they'd come for. Should they applaud? Should they stay silent? Should they cry? This felt too important for standard responses, too sacred for normal reactions. Then someone in the audience started crying, a woman in the 5th row, then someone else, a man in the back, then more, then the entire studio, tears everywhere, because what they just witnessed wasn't entertainment. It was a human being choosing truth over success, choosing authenticity over safety, choosing to be real even when the cost might be everything. Johnny stood up, walked over to Dean. The camera stayed on them, no commercial break, no interruption. Just two men in a moment. Johnny hugged him on camera, in front of America. No joke, no bit, no performance. Just genuine human connection. "Thank you," Johnny whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "For what?" Dean asked. "For being the bravest person I've ever met." What Dean Martin revealed that night wasn't spontaneous. The character had been carefully constructed decades earlier. September 1946. The Copa Lounge in Cleveland. Dean was performing 5 nights a week. Still Dino Crosetti. Still the Italian kid from Steubenville trying to make it in a world that didn't want Italian kids. His voice was good. Everyone said so. But good wasn't enough. An agent named Morris Kleiman came to see him one night. Sat through 2 sets. Called Dean over afterward. "Mr. Crosetti, you're talented. Real talent. But you're too Italian. Your name, your look, your whole presentation. America isn't buying Italian crooners right now. They want smooth. They want safe. They want someone who feels like home, not someone who reminds them of the ethnic neighborhoods they're afraid of." Dean had heard this before. Different agents, same message. "What do I need to change?" he asked. Kleiman thought about it. "You already changed the name. That's good. Dean Martin sounds American. But you need a hook, something that makes you non-threatening. Something that makes people comfortable." "Like what?" "Make them laugh. Make them feel superior. Give them a character they can understand. The smooth guy who drinks a little too much. The charmer who's harmless. The singer who's so easy he's practically asleep. That sells." Dean went back to his dressing room, thought about it. The next night, he grabbed a tumbler filled with ginger ale, carried it on stage, took a sip between songs, made a joke about needing fortification. The audience laughed, loved it. The next night he did it again, added a slight stumble, another laugh. Within a month, it was part of the act. The glass, the jokes about drinking, the casual ease that suggested he was performing tipsy. Club owners loved it. Audiences loved it. Bookings increased. The character worked, but the character cost him in ways he didn't anticipate in 1946. Cost him his identity. Who was he when the performance ended? Who was Dino when Don Martin wasn't needed? He'd played the role so long he couldn't remember. One night in 1965, his son Denpaul asked him a question. "Dad, why do you always have a drink in your hand on TV, but I've never seen you drunk at home?" Dean didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to your child that your entire public persona is performance? That the dad they know isn't the person America knows? It's part of the act, son. But people think it's real. I know. Doesn't that bother you? It did, but Dean didn't say that. Just changed the subject. Jane, his wife, asked him one night in 1970. They were having dinner, alone, rare. Do you ever feel like you're disappearing? Like Dean Martin is taking over and Dino is fading? Dean looked at her, saw that she understood, saw that she'd noticed. Every day, he said. Does it scare you? Terrifies me. Then why do you keep doing it? Because I don't know who I am without it anymore. Dean looked at himself in the mirror before shows and didn't recognize the person staring back. The perfectly styled hair, the expensive suit, the practiced smile, that was Dean Martin. But where was Dino? Where was the kid who'd fought 50 times in Steubenville? Where was the person who'd changed his name to survive? Where was the real human underneath the performance? He didn't know. And by 1973, the not knowing had become unbearable. What happened immediately after the broadcast was unprecedented. NBC's switchboard exploded. 50,000 calls in the first hour, 70,000 by midnight. People demanding answers, expressing emotions, processing what they'd seen. Half the calls were angry, felt betrayed. I loved Dean Martin and he lied to me for 27 years. How can I trust anything he does now? The drunk act was the best part and it was fake. They felt deceived, manipulated, like a friend had been lying to their face. The other half were grateful, moved, transformed. Thank you for being honest. I've been pretending too, and seeing you drop the act gives me courage. This is the bravest thing I've ever seen on television. The media frenzy the next day was massive. Every newspaper, every television news program, every radio show. Dean's career was affected immediately. Chrysler pulled their offer for Dunn to be the spokesman for their new luxury line. The contract was worth $2 million. They'd been in final negotiations. The drunk character was part of the appeal. Sophisticated, smooth, just tipsy enough to be fun. Without the character, they weren't interested. We wanted Dean Martin, the Chrysler executive told the LA Times. We don't know who Dino Crossetti is, but other opportunities appeared. Francis Ford Coppola called, wanted Dean for a serious dramatic role in his next film. I always knew you were acting, Coppola said. Now I want to see what you can really do. The role was small but meaningful. It led to other serious work, more authentic work. Caesar's Palace stood by him, extended his Vegas contract. The general manager told Variety, Dean Martin or Dino Crossetti, the man fills seats. That's what matters to us. The honesty makes him more interesting, not less. The long-term effect on his legacy was profound. That confession became the thing people remembered. Not just the performer, the human being, the man who chose truth, the person who admitted he'd been pretending, the courage to be real when it cost everything. Decades later, when people discussed Dean Martin, that Tonight Show appearance came up. The night he dropped the mask, the night he chose authenticity, the night he showed America that even the coolest person in the room was struggling underneath. March 14, the 1973 Tonight Show. Johnny Carson dared Dean Martin to drop the act. Dean admitted the drunk character was fake. 77 million people watched it happen. And Dean Martin chose truth over everything else. That moment taught America something important. Something that still resonates. Celebrities are human. Success doesn't mean you have everything figured out. Fame doesn't erase struggle. Money doesn't buy authenticity. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you've been pretending. Admit the character isn't real. Admit you're tired of the performance. Admit you want to be yourself, even if it costs you everything. Dean Martin spent 27 years building a character, perfecting it, making millions from it, becoming famous because of it. And one night, in front of the entire country, he let it go. Not because it was safe, not because it was smart, not because it was strategic, but because living with the lie had become harder than facing the consequences of truth. Because being Dino mattered more than being Dean Martin. Because authenticity mattered more than success. Because truth mattered more than safety. That's courage. That's what makes that night matter. That's what makes Dean Martin's confession one of the most important moments in television history. If you want to see more stories about Dean Martin, the private moments, the hidden struggles, the man behind the performance, there's an entire playlist waiting for you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story.